All right, folks, those of you who have tuned in to this episode of Niagara Due North, brought to you by Parmesan, um, I read an article on the National Post written by Jordan Peterson. Are you a fan of Jordan Peterson? I love Jordan Peterson. Okay, he's a Canadian hero. Okay, now he's also really smart, really smart. Okay, and he wrote a very lengthy article in the National Post about the tensions between Canada and Alberta, and the Canada and US. And so, thank you for tuning on in, guys. I'm not going to have a shitty title sequence for you today. We're just going to jump right on in to the article because this is a special episode. You're watching this at 1:30 in the morning because you can't sleep. Okay? So hopefully I can help you with that. And here we go. The Jordan Peterson article, the Jordan Peterson mega article that I am going to read to you for the foreseeable future. There is little doubt that one, Donald J. Trump has truly and effectively rattled his northern neighbor's chains. Aren't the Americans our friends? And vice versa? Is the president serious in his desire to make Canada the 51st state? He certainly seems serious when discussing his proposed takeover of Greenland with the Danish Prime Minister last week. Such intensity and unpredictability of purpose has sent the leaders of that country, reminiscent of the Canadian Liberals, to their political orientation into a tizzy. One that has extended to their socialist and globalist European compatriots. Who is this horrible orange-haired man, they wonder? And what does he want? We're all about to find out, and not least in Canada. Why is all this happening, we ask, wringing our hands, and to us, the self-proclaimed great best friend and staunch ally of the elephant who parades so theatrically on the far side of our southern border? We might begin to answer that suddenly so relevant question by scrupulously questioning the nature of that friendship, and on our side. Perhaps we're not the partners and collaborators we think we are, for starters. It could well be argued, for example, that our much vaunted Canuck niceness in relation to the superpower who overshadows us in every manner is and has been a matter of blunt necessity, rather than a consequence of our genuine reliability as a well-wisher and supporter. It is true that Canada has made sacrifices alongside the Americans when freedom and democracy was truly threatened. That was real. But it was a long time ago. Since then, we have played and continue to play a crooked game with regard to our hypothetical U.S. allies in many other important and consequential regards. A telling personal example might serve to introduce this reevaluation. I lived in the U.S. from 1992 to 98, during the last time that remarkable country truly boomed. When I returned from America's finest university to Canada's, I brought with me 3 brilliant students, 2 of whom, a married couple, were both thoroughly sensible and somewhat on the conservative side. It proved somewhat unexpectedly difficult to take my junior colleagues anywhere in Toronto, particularly at the university, without continual embarrassment on my part for merely being Canadian. As a casual anti-Americanism would inevitably be directed toward them whenever the inevitable topic of their place of origin arose. My fellow countrymen continually said things that would have been regarded as clearly racist, sexist, or ethnocentric had they been uttered to anyone other than an American citizen. Assuming rightly, given the civilized nature of the people in question, they that they would not pull not that they would not take them politely and without evident offense. Such comments were more likely to emanate as well from precisely the sort of leftists prone to proclaim, first, that such behavior is utterly unacceptable, and second, that such conduct would, of course, never show its face among people as good as their thoughts, as good in their thoughts as them. Guys, we're getting a verbal lashing from Jordan Peterson. Such behavior is sadly a Canadian norm, particularly wherever the country is left leaning, particularly wherever everyone believes axiomatically that we have all the virtues of our democratic compatriots to the south, and then some, particularly wherever everyone is inclined to point self-righteously to the wonders of our own now dreadful and even oft murderous free healthcare system and its associated highly dysfunctional, expensive, and increasingly unsustainable social safety net, and compare it to the free-for-all in US they inevitably resort to if death threatens and they have the money. That combined attitude of essentially socialist sentiment and moral superiority was exemplified above all, perhaps by the former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. And I'm speaking now not of the Phils, who resigned in disgrace after sacrificing our economy to the gods of his self-serving utopian globalist delusion. I'm referring instead to the pair who dallied so self-aggrandizingly with the Chinese Reds and the dictatorial communist Fidel Castro and rubbed the Americans' noses in it, moralizing intellectually and oh so fashionably all the while. You guys still with me? Because that was a hard one. Why Canadians also pride ourselves on our peaceful and peacekeeping nature. Take that, Yanks. Contrasting that with the warmongering attitude of the gunslingers we secretly admire, but publicly disdain, forgetting ever so conveniently that it is nothing but our positioning under the fearsome nuclear umbrella of the USA, and our knowledge of the certainty of their military protection if push comes to shove, that allows us to be the sheep of peace who bleat their undeserved self-regard with so little shame. This is well said, man. Holy. This is why I'm reading this to you guys. I'm not there yet. Let's add to that our absolute and disgraceful refusal to pull our fair share of the weight with regards to our own woke, broke, and demoralized military. Trump recently informed his NATO allies that the US would like to see them spend 5% of their GDP on defense. He'd be happy in truth to see 3 and would settle, and has said so for 2. Canada misspends 1.3%, a figure so low that we have reduced our own soldiers, of whom there are frighteningly few, to a state where they find it necessary to purchase even their own helmets. We camouflage this failure by trumpeting our commitment to peace. as we love to do when our politicians take the international stage, or when we slap a Canadian flag on our backpacks while hostiling through Europe and Asia, to differentiate ourselves from the evil imperialists to the south. This is hardly the way to signal the US, either that we are capable of defending ourselves, thank you very much, or that we are grateful for their existence as a big brother captain of the high school wrestling team. Much disdained protector of our junior hippie student radical selves, such things matter more than we think. And a lot more, now that Middle America is in charge. Given the well-deserved contempt that lot have for the niceties of our hypocritical, socialist, smart kid in the class peaceniks. To signal to the US either that we are capable of defending ourselves, thank you very much, or that we are grateful for their existence as a big brother captain of the high school wrestling team. Much disdained protector of our junior hippie student radical selves. Such things matter more than we think, and a lot more. Now that Middle America is in charge, given the well-deserved contempt that a lot have for the niceties of hypocritical socialists, smart kid in the class peaceniks, remember, Canucks, the US is now run by exactly the kind of Americans that we tempt themselves so unforgivably to treat as our moral inferiors. This is not how friends behave. It is also no way to keep friends once they have hypothetically been made. And we've been put on serious notice in that regard. And we're only scratching the surface in our analysis of the problems with Canada-US relations and with Canada itself, with that nothing but preliminary analysis. For the last 9 years, Canada has been run by exactly the type of contemptible elitists who are, if anything, even more anti-capitalist, anti-nationalist, and anti-industrial state than the typical Canadian. This has set us against our putative American allies in a manner much deeper than we want to think. And don't be thinking that any of this is lost on Trump. He clearly despises the recently departed Justin and has as much respect for those who elected him as he does for the Democrats, so much like them, who tortured, tormented, and despised him, and the flyover country MAGA middlebrows who are so much wiser in their political instincts than their Ivy League wannabe masters. Canadians are Democrats, in Trump's view, except more so. We think that's a virtue. It's not. It's a liability in all general manners. More specifically, it's a liability in relation to the US, particularly now. It has also, and more seriously, threatened both Canada's economic viability and likelihood it will survive as a nation. We might also note that in regard that the newly obtained and inevitable grand poobah of the currently wretched but still dangerously powerful Liberals, one Mark Carney, is one of the world's prime advocates of the insane inanities of net zero. He is a man who has planned in writing, not least in his best-selling book Values, the complete destruction of the fossil fuel industry. Bye-bye, Alberta. If that's not bad enough, and it is, he is also simultaneously an advocate for the same post-national view of Canada defined by Trudeau Jr. and his moralistic minions. What are we, according to such good thinkers? Nothing. But if anything, the oppressive, patriarchal, white supremacist, identityless colonial settler state defined by the progressive ideologues in the think tanks, the elite dining rooms in Eastern Canada, and the protest encampments on the campuses of Canadian universities. One of this fills the MAGA crowd with admiration, in case it has to be said. None of it bodes well, either, for the economy of Canada. None of it bodes well, either, for the economy of Canada, doomed to replacement, according to Carney, by hydrogen, solar, and wind power that neither does not exist or that would doom Canadians to starve and freeze in the dark if it ever came to replace the reliable grid and transportation we all so desperately depend on when it's 40 bloody below. We may, when arguing so expensively and incompetently with the Americans, continue to congratulate ourselves on our comparative righteousness. That diet will become even thinner gruel, however, in the future, characterized by their explosive economic growth and our rapid descent towards comparative poverty and irrelevance. Carney, to put it bluntly, is not a man like Justin Trudeau, a second-rater under a mere influence of the World Economic Forum. That Malthusian, fear-mongering cabal of authoritarian elitists drunk on the fumes of their own self-righteous delusions. He is by contrast a veritable leader of that movement, an organizer par excellence of ESG, stakeholder capitalism, diversity, equity, and inclusiveness, and degrowth. Out with the old, the Liberals claim, and in with the new. But the new will be everything Trudeau so terribly was not a lot more efficiently. But the new will be everything Trudeau so terribly was, but a lot more efficiently. And with much more sophisticated rationalization. None of this is lost on the MAGA mob. And so far as they deign to notice, and they notice enough, it might be reiterated to shake our foundation. You guys still with me here? It's a big read, man. Consider, therefore, with regard to do this, something more pointed and illustrative. That would be the current plight of Alberta, and with it Saskatchewan and even BC. Although the latter is still too blind and holier-than-thou socialist to note its larger danger that confronts it. The most American of all Canadian provinces, by widespread reputation and self-regard, Alberta is also the polity. That is Eastern Canada. Particularly Quebec relies on to survive. While it pursues its disdainful socialist green agenda, this is the Quebec that has whined and manipulated so effectively for so many decades that its bilingual citizenry utterly dominates not only the perennial ruling Liberal Party, but the federal bureaucracy. Something that I complain about. That constitutes only two such unjust and unproductive advantages among many. By the way, and all that despite the despite of Francophony's strong and lasting separatist leanings. This is the same Eastern Canada and Quebec that regards itself as entitled not only to the so-called transfer payments characterizing the Canadian social contract, much to the disadvantage of the resource-rich West, but that simultaneously assumes and trumpets a moral superiority for the people who earn that transferred money in a manner deeply reminiscent of that more generally assumed by Canadians with respect to Americans. The consequence? No business case for the trade deals or infrastructure projects necessary to supply a self-admittedly desperate Europe and Japan with cheap and reliable Alberta energy. No new, plentiful, and gratefully received pipelines running west to east in Canada. Abject economic dependence in consequence for Albertans and Canada itself, as we are now finding out. Abject economic dependence in consequence for Albertans on the purchasing decisions of the Mad MAGA Yanks to the south. And now that same Alberta is being called upon to sacrifice its artificially and morally limited economy to fight off the looming tariffs of Donald Trump, the imposition of which should come to no surprise to anyone with at least bit awake. We walked right into this, folks, and boy, we deserved it. But we felt good about ourselves all the way. And what is likely to result? Trump has offered Canada status as a 51st state. If we had a well-constituted country, this would never have happened. Or the suggestions would have been laughable. I see damn few people laughing, however, and more's the pity. A strong case can be made that such subordinate status would not at all be a good deal for the Great White North as a whole. For Alberta, however, and perhaps for much of the West, the situation is not so clear. Here's what I might do, given that if I were in Danielle Smith's shoes, or at least what I might threaten to do, taking a page from Trump's Art of the Deal book. I might travel, say, to Mar-a-Lago, where I did, in fact, recently encounter that premier. I might have, while there, a forthright, even blunt chat with Donald J., where I might say to him something like the following. Mr. President, my fellow Canadians have for decades compelled us to climb into bed with an 800-pound gorilla. That would be you, Mr. Trump. Now you've decided to consummate the deal, so to speak. And we've given you the upper hand on a silver platter. While you're doing so, Canada is unlikely to become the 51st state. However, not even Alberta, as you well know, sir. After all, you'd have to offer us something better than what's been put forward by our fellow Canadians. That would be the continued privilege and expense of subsidizing Quebec. Half of those citizens constantly clamor to secede from the country while we impoverish ourselves for their benefit. The constant imposition of serious practical impediments from the federal and other provincial governments, like British Columbia, to the international business deals and pipelines that would help Alberta bring its resources to the market. Continual insult on top of such injury in the form of unbearable and naive moralization about their superiority in conviction with regard to the sustainability of the planet. And, to top it all off, the accusation that I am not patriotic enough to start a trade war with my strange bedfellow in the name of a country whose very leaders proclaim both identitylessness and multiculturalism that none of my citizens want. And Trump might as well say, I think I could top that offer, Miss Premier. Fine as that is, I could offer Albertans the American dollar, full access to our markets for their resources at full international price, lower costs on almost all manufactured goods on the food, lower taxes, both corporate and personal, membership in a country that prides itself on being a country and that does not plan to dissolve itself into an unstable multicultural mishmash, genuine admiration for your economic and industrial endeavors, along with a can-do visionary and deeply entrepreneurial culture. Immediate, reliable, and guaranteed access to ports and pipelines, and full military defense. I don't know, that sounds like our deal's better, isn't it? And if that's not enough, dear lady, no transfer payments, and the additional psychological advantage for the Albertans and foregoing the perpetual and bullying Eastern Canada attitude of grievance and moral superiority, emanating in particular from the Quebec, who also shamelessly disdains your dirty fossil fuel, such that they made the fracking Alberta's economy depend on depends upon literally illegal in their jurisdiction just to make a point, while simultaneously accepting, and not with good grace, the filthy money so generated. What do you think would happen, O Canada, if those were the two choices put forth on the ballot before the citizens of Alberta? And why should Smith not take full advantage of this opportunity to tell her fellow Canadians in no uncertain terms a few things that would both make Canada an attractive place for Alberta to stay and much saner and richer to boot? And what would that be? Enough pathetic celebrity wannabe pandering to the international elites of Davos. Number one. And for good measure, the utterly degenerate UN. Enough overt and covert attempt to destroy the basis of the economy of my fair and hard-working province. Enough delaying critical infrastructure development and rejection of the international trade offers for natural gas, oil, and coal. Enough treatment of the resources economy upon which Quebec in particular so unacceptably depends as a moral pariah. Enough idiot green moralizing. Enough carbon tax. Enough bloody net zero. And how about this? Enough multiculturalism and destruction of the Canadian identity. Why belong so expensively to a country that despises its own history, economy, and people? Make us a better offer, and quickly, my Canadian friends, or Trump's tariffs will be the least of your problems. And all of this would not only be good for Alberta, and by extension for the working people of Canada. It is also absolutely necessary for Canada, even perhaps to survive both economically and politically. There's a reason we, like the Europeans, now make a measly 60 cents on every dollar made by our American friends. That reason has much to do with the attitudes we have adopted over since the belated 1960s that have made us such good friends at all. Trump is threatening the integrity of Canada, and very effectively. The fact of that threat and of its effectiveness might make us think twice, and such thinking, there could be the opportunity to shed the idiocy that is making us poor, weak, irrelevant on the international stage, and contemptible to our neighbors. We could make this saber rattling into an opportunity, increase our cross border trade, get out of our own way on the energy front, rekindle our national pride, at least to the point where we regard our country as both viable and valuable, seek the international markets that would make us more truly independent as a nation, strengthen our commitment to the military that would be increasingly and truly necessary if such independence was pursued, and make the next 100 years Canada, and make the next 100 years Canada's triumph instead of the story of its contemptible, self-aggrandizing, moralistic, falsely green and socialist demise. And with that, I am finally done. Thank you so much for holding on to that. Someone tell me where he's wrong. Someone tell me where he's wrong. The stupid part is there's going to be people in the comment sections down below that actually want to see Canada be destroyed because they want their house next to a fucking windmill. Get the hell out of my country. I don't care if you were born here. You don't like US, you don't like Alberta, you don't like oil. Get out. Get out. I love Jordan Peterson. Guys, this was just as hard for me to read as it was for you to listen. Okay? I hope that I was able to suck some people in here to the very end, guys. Jordan Peterson is top percent in Canada's peoples, and it's because of Justin Trudeau. Jordan Peterson is now an American. And a large number of other Canadians are thinking about moving down to the United States because of this. Okay? I don't want to become a 51st state, but it's starting to become more and more viable an option. Guys, this is Parmesan. I'm your host at Niagara Due North. Please subscribe down below so I can get you another video. I'll see you guys later.